All right, Rob. Welcome. My name is Stu Wallace. I'm representing the Wings of Knowledge Committee. Wings of Knowledge is a presentation we do here about once a month on all different kinds of subjects. In fact, in 2 weeks we have Songs of Nepal, which is about as far away as you can get from this subject tonight. Tonight's subject will be fun, and this is a program that every Engineers Week, I finally figured out when Engineers Week is because I find George Washington's birthday. Every Engineers Week we team up with the AET Club, who presents us with our speaker. This one should be a lot of fun because, as Veronica earlier, I used to be the state's first director of Division of Historical Research. It was fun. I got lots of history to do, right? I spent all my time in the highway department. In the highway department, people deal with a lot of history and other stuff, especially when they go the highway down the middle of the main street. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to the AET Department President, Volker Kurzik. And you're on.
Hello, my name is Volker Kurzik. I'm the president of the Architecture Club. Last semester, we got the privilege of going to take a tour of the Main Street project. We thought it was a great idea. We really liked the tour, so we thought it was a great idea for them to come up and do a presentation for the Wings of Knowledge this year. With over 30 years of engineering experience, Ed Roberge is a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Hampshire. He graduated Northeastern University with a degree in civil engineering and has been the city engineer of Concord since 2005. Ed is responsible for the daily operations of the Engineering Services Division, including management of technical staff, development of engineering policy, as well as programming a significant portion of the city's comprehensive capital improvement program. Brett Sinclair is a partner in Lewis Carno and Company Communications, which is based here in Concord. Brett is an accredited public relations practitioner with over 25 years of experience in the field. He designed and leads the successful Concord Main Street project communication systems. I do want to mention one thing. We are selling cash calendars for the club for the month of March, If stop on the way out and ask us a couple questions about it, and they're $5 a piece. And then without further ado, I'd like to turn the table over to Ed Roberge and Brett Sinclair.
Great. All right, well, thanks, everybody. So how many civils are in here? How many civil students? How many architectural students? Any electrical people in here? Anybody else? Any other engineering discipline that I didn't say? All right, I want to know how technical I can get and or how.
Majors.
What's that?
Bio majors.
Bio majors. Excellent. All right, well, thanks everybody for taking the time to have us down here today. My name is Ed Roberge, as was said, and I'm the city engineer in Concord, and I'm certainly always pleased to talk about the Concord Main Street project and all the parts and pieces that went into it to make it essentially happen. I'm going to talk a little bit about what really shaped the project tonight. And that's a little bit of guidance. We'll talk about our really constrained project timeline, the planning, design development component to it, including the communication that Brett is really going to get into, because that's different. Really a lot of focus went into the communication, still does today, to make this successful. And then procurement, how we actually got a contract underway, and then we'll get into a little bit of the construction. Actually, we'll get into it a lot of bit, and I have a lot of photos today to go through to kind of show you really what this was. So what exactly is this Main Street project? You hear a lot about it, and it's a multimodal project, again, looking at kind of the complete streets element, but it's really roadway safety. Somebody just mentioned about a highway being right down the middle of Main Street. Well, that's what we had. We had a 4-lane highway that was really auto-centric. I'll show you a great photo from 1970 in a minute. But that's what Main Street really was, a highway. It was a state route, state-numbered route, federal-numbered route, and that's how people kind of got north and south through the spine of the state. And that's something that really needed to change. It's a downtown core. Really, we started looking or talking about the function of livability, and what exactly is livability, and placemaking, and public art. How do all these things kind of tie into a transportation or a highway project? Well, we're about to see. So this didn't just start in 2012 or 2014. It really started back in 1997 when we started focusing on downtown, the central downtown core, and looked at different studies. So there were studies done in 1997 and studies in 2001, 5, 6, and then ultimately in 2011 that shared a lot of components to it. A lot of, how do we address vehicle safety? How do we address pedestrian? How do we really build economic vitality? All of that kind of came into each study individually. So by the end of 2011, when the Rethinking Main Street project came along and really started looking at some of these newer concepts, the livability elements, that's when our kind of mindset started to really take shape. So by that time frame, 2009 shaping into 2011, we now saw what we call our Complete Streets policy. And that Complete Streets policy, which was adopted by City Council in 2009, really focused on pedestrian and bikes in the transportation system, all modes, public transit as well, making sure that everything was accessible and there was plenty of choice on all city streets, whether or not it's Loudon Road, whether or not it's Pleasant Street, whether or not it's Fort Eddy Road coming in and out of here. Those were all important things. And then tying that into neighborhood context sensitivity. How do we get from place to place, recognizing highways, interstates, local roads, arterial highways, and balancing all of that? So I'm going to step back a minute here to say, where did this kind of thought process come from? Well, early 2000 time frame, we had a little bit of bad luck with the term traffic calming. And we went through somewhat of a renaissance and said a lot of confusion between some neighborhoods, between city council, and really staff. We didn't have a really good guidance. So we introduced our first policy in 2005. It was called the Traffic Management Policy. And if you saw an 11 by 17 sheet of paper that had 64 decision points in it, it was very confusing and cumbersome. So we said we need to do better than that. When we take this to the public and try to assist either businesses or residents, it's not working. So we looked at trying to this more pragmatic approach, and we developed this new policy, our new transportation policy, as I call it. It's not new anymore because it's really well applied here in Concord. And it was really to assist the development of policy. So City Council comes along, creates what we call this Transportation Policy Advisory Committee. It's doing all of these things, long-range planning, policy, and it really essentially looks like this. It's one element. It's TPAC, as we call it, the Transportation Policy Advisory Committee, and it has 4 subcommittee legs to it. And these are all citizen representatives of the community, either transportation professionals. We have a lot of state and federal folks that participate. And we're looking specifically at all of these aspects of transportation: biking, pedestrians, public transit. PTC is a public transit committee. And then TOC is our traffic operations leg. That's kind of the technical leg that we at staff support. All of these together are really shaping how we've developed where we are today. And now our whole focus is in lieu of, say, highway capacity. It's no longer a highway capacity goal that we're trying to strive. It's safety and it's livability. It's separating auto-centric or building highway capacity on local streets, more something that's more context sensitive, and it balances comfortable and safe living and comfortable and safe transportation. It's all really related to economic vitality. The strength of your transportation system, at least in my opinion, and probably shared by a number, is really the strength of your economic standing in the community. With a safe, reliable transportation system, you can get to and from, goods move, folks feel good, folks will live here. That's really what this is all about. So this Complete Streets policy now, by the later part of 2009 going into 2011, shaped us up for what we thought was a great application for this TIGER grant program. And TIGER is an acronym with Federal Highway. It's Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery. And that is a program that was, we thought, geared directly for the Main Street project. So in 2011, we applied. and it was our first go at it. We thought it was a good application, and we fell short. It's a very competitive program. So it's, and essentially in 2011, there were, I believe, close to 1,200 applications, and they awarded 55. So that when 2012 came along and said, we're not done with this, we're going to strengthen our application, we're going to do a couple of different things to really try to communicate this better, and got communication involved early in that, and we were successful. We were one of 43 grants that were awarded in 2012, that's nationwide, out of some 877 applications. So very competitive, and we delivered. We were awarded that in June of 2012. We had a really specific time schedule. So again, our timeline was very constrained. We really had to do what they call commitment. This is having our final design completed by July 1st of 2013 so that those grant funds could be obligated within that. So our contract award about August of 2013, it would go until about September of 2014, and construction would kind of run us right through the early part of, or the later part of 2014 into the later part of 2016. So here's Main Street. So 1970, as you can see then, very auto-centric, and there's one pedestrian right there. That's really kind of a tough location. And in 2014, it really doesn't look any different. It's the same 4-lane highway. You can't really see what is going on. There's so much, looks like clutter with parking and signs and whatnot. This is what Main Street looks like today. And this is what it's really all about. And it's nice, you can see the wreaths up. This means that this is in December. This is a pretty recent photo, and our sidewalks were still beaming with people. This is new opportunity. This is economic vitality. So that's where our change in thought process, starting from our city manager to our city council, that direction is bringing us to where we are today. And that focus is livability and safety. And those were Tiger program direct priorities. It's creating reliable transportation with streets, sidewalks, and bike lanes, and barrier-free access. And I'll show you a couple of photos where we took something which is a typical transportation highway project is limited in its accessibility elements, particularly with buildings, but we tied that in together because we thought that was the right thing to do. And the number of businesses that have barriers to them, meaning steps, and they're not ramp ready, or even somebody with some mobility challenges, we've actually incorporated that into the project, and that creates economic vitality. And again, that's really what this is all about. So we get the award later part of September of 2012. We thought it was best to work with our city council and create what we call a project advisory committee. And the city council thought, what better way to create consensus on a design, which is to create a 17-member committee to do this work together. And to do this work, they only had really a short period of time. That was about September to November to deliver what they thought was a consensus plan to work. The group met 14 times, and hats off to this committee, because this was a cross-section that was created by the mayor and city council of folks throughout the community, different stakeholders, a whole host of different issues and interests. Again, we met 14 times. There were over 38 appearances with public testimony that was available. We even created or hosted what we call this New Hampshire Listen Session. This is a program that is supported by UNH, and we had well over 150 people at this November 7, 2012 event. We continued with individual design elements. So this 17-page report is put together by this committee, delivered to City Council, and they completed their task. They delivered what was the consensus design of what you see today in a very, very short amount of time. So it was very concentrated, and it was the only way that this project was going to work is if we could get out to the public as many times as we could, and it continued after this. But get out to the public as many times as we could, as often as we could, just to make this as transparent as possible. we accomplished that. So in November of 2012, we still had that July 1st, 2013 deadline to have essentially the project ready to bid and ready to go. They gave us 32 weeks of a design permitting process to complete. Now, when you're looking at a project, an $11.65 million project that we have, 32 weeks sounds pretty good, but we were still inviting the public to participate this. So it grew from there. So we designed something that we would have these public meetings just about every other month, December, January, March, and April of 2013, to make sure that we would design, we'd present, design, present, design, present. At the same time, we also had 2 council public hearings. There's a lot of public process that was involved in this. We actually even had another New Hampshire listening sessions in February of 2013, and we had another 150 some odd folks that came to that, really wide open. That's what made this project work. And by the time that July 1st came along, we were able to deliver what our final design was, and we had our game plan, and we were ready to bid this project. Right around that July 1st time frame was when Carno came into the picture. So I'm going to hand this off to Brett right now, and he's going to talk about how he began to shape this project, and we'll get back into procurement in a second.
Thanks, Ed.
You want this?
I do need that.
You take that piece. And this is pretty informal, so if you guys have any questions, just feel free to interrupt as we go.
There any questions for Ed before I, yeah, go ahead.
How did you end up?
Oh, that's a good question. And he said, how did you end up selecting 17 members? So the mayor and the city council got together, and they really, this was a project advisory committee at the city council level. And they selected those members that they thought were most appropriate. As I said, business leaders were involved, just regular citizens, police or public safety officials, just a whole different cross-section of folks that were involved.
Any other? Yeah.
You said it took 32 weeks for the design approval, right? If you didn't have such a strict deadline due to the Tiger Grant, how long would you say that usually takes?
We may still be selecting colors of brick right now if without that deadline. No, it really, that's probably an appropriate time frame to do a major project like this. But where we want it to really be that open, it often becomes very difficult because you're polling, people, and we're trying to reach out to as many folks as possible. It just takes time to be able to do that. And then to address all the ideas that we were getting. We had free flow of information coming to us all the time, which was great. That really shaped the project. But at the same time, it becomes very difficult to manage. So, yeah, we were able to pull that off, and it was heroic with some of the folks that were involved. I would say that.
What was the initial reaction from local businesses?
Well, that's a great question, and Brett might get into that a little bit. But, folks were really scared. They were really scared of the unknown. They knew, and this group of folks, our downtown merchants and businesses, they did a lot of work on their own, too. And we really encouraged it. They went out to other downtowns locations that had recently completed projects, whether it be Barry, Vermont, or Littleton, New Hampshire, and looked at what those projects, what the result was, and they talked to merchants there. So there was really a concern, an apprehension about, boy, are you going to shut down Main Street, and how are we going to survive? Are we going to be able to survive this 2-year construction project? So we'll get into that a little bit, but that's a good question. All right.
Thanks. And I would encourage you, as Ed said, this is meant to be kind of an interactive presentation. So if you have any questions, just feel free to ask as we go along. So again, my name's Brett St. Clair. I'm with Lewis Carno and Company Communications. Our office is over on Warren Street here in Concord, and through a competitive bidding process, we were selected by the City of Concord to support the Main Street project with a communication effort. And I think the reason that they did it was because of all of the public input that had been received through the series of meetings and the design process and so forth that Ed outlined, and also, quite frankly, because this is quite a high stakes endeavor, totally reconstructing your downtown streetscape, 9 blocks of the capital city of New Hampshire. And so having heard from the merchant community and others, their concerns, the apprehension that was there, they hired us to help support the project. And I think the challenge, and my background, I was not an engineering major or a nuclear engineer or anything like that. My background, my degree's in English teaching, so I was basically like a poetry major, right? And so I think one of the things that I've actually brought to projects like this or other endeavors is that, quite frankly, I think one of my core competencies is being dumb in a smart way. And so that really helps in interpreting what is on these plans that folks like you can understand, but sort of the victims of projects like this who might be downtown merchants or people who work downtown or patrons and so forth, it's really hard for them to kind of interpret a set of plans and kind of have that vision of what the future tend to be afraid of change. And so I think our job was helping to communicate kind of what is in Ed's head and other heads like Ed's, and communicate that to the public in a way that they can then kind of get excited about what the potential for this project would be. Let's see, click. So a question, and you're not allowed to answer this because you got to this point, Victoria, when we spoke earlier. What's the difference between being a spectator and a player? Any thoughts? Yeah.
Players make the game play, whereas spectators kind of just hoot and shout.
Okay. Right. I think that pretty much covers it. Is that spectators? Anybody heard of the term Monday morning quarterback? Nobody? Anybody? What's it mean?
Basically, it's great to, you can quarterback a game after it's been played. You can essentially say what was right and what was wrong. But then again, you also weren't the person in the game making the decisions at the time.
Right. It's kind of like sports talk radio on Monday morning after the Patriots have played, or whatever. They always know better. Somebody always knows better. They're sitting on their couch, watch the game, and are second guessing the decisions that the coach made or the quarterback made or whomever. And so the challenge is, I think, in projects like this, a lot of the people who are affected by it and actually who make decisions about how, whether we're going to do something like this in the future, or whether it was worth it, or whether we should put support behind it, they can either be spectators and kind of Monday morning quarterbacks, or you can turn them into players, meaning that players have more invested in the effort. They're making things happen. They tend to be less judgmental about mistakes that might be made because they know that their teammates are trying just as hard as they can to make something successful. And so our goal in the Main Street project was to try to get the whole community behind the project and to make people feel like they're players rather than spectators and critics. Okay, so and the difference between, I think, what someone like I do and someone who might say that they're in public relations is I'm an accredited public relations practitioner. So just like those of you who, Ed has, I think, some letters probably behind his name that are a certification that he, is an actual engineer and can, had to pass a test or, something like that after he graduated from school. I'm accredited by the Public Relations Society of America. I have 3 little letters after my name, APR, accredited in public relations. And so I look at sort of challenges like this more strategically than someone who might be in sort of PR. Anybody can say, any poetry major can say that they do PR, quite frankly. But people who do that tend to go straight to tactics, and they don't do strategy or research before developing a program. So the point, I'm not going to go into this. I could talk for this, for 3 hours, but what we did to support this project is basically we have a sort of an engineering process, just like you do as engineers, and it starts with research. Then we move from research to planning, planning to implementation, and then either after we implement or as we are implementing, we evaluate what we do. And I'll talk about that a little bit more so that we determine whether or not are we meeting our goals, are we kind of doing what we hope we intended to do as we go along. So when Ed talks about merchants doing, kind of going to places and talking to folks in Barre, Vermont, or Littleton, New Hampshire were mentioned. When we were hired, that's the first thing that we started to do is we talked to places that had done other projects like this, researched it on the internet, found out things that had been done. And quite frankly, one of the most beneficial things that I did, I actually had a friend in Littleton, New Hampshire, who was a business owner there, and I called him when we were in the process actually of putting our proposal together for the city and talked to him about what was the most beneficial thing that somebody like me could do in an environment like a construction project downtown. He basically said, hey, look, the most important thing that you can do is to make sure that the business people in the downtown know what's going to happen in terms of the construction, are informed about that so that they don't show up one morning and find a piece of plywood thrown over the sidewalk in front of their place of business on the busiest, sale day they have of the whole year, and their sidewalk's all torn up and they'll be all upset, that kind of thing. So we basically designed a program that would sort of help with that. And we set not only sort of a goal of trying to get the whole community behind the project, but then objectives in our planning process, one of which was to maintain commerce. That came through loud and clear from all the public listening sessions and so forth that Ed and the project advisory committee in the city had done. So it's important that we don't have a brand new streetscape with beautiful sidewalks and trees and planters if a lot of the businesses go out of business while the construction's going on. That was a huge fear, quite frankly. And again, people are skeptical about things that they don't know about. Parking, huge issue, always in the downtown area, and the merchant community and others were very skeptical about where are people going to park. They're not going to be able to get to us while this construction's going on. So we want to encourage people to park in the garages or on side streets. One of the things that we discovered, a lot of people don't know where the parking garages are. Or you might not know that it costs 25 cents an hour less to park in a parking garage than it does, on the street, for example. So we tried to inform people about that. Third goal, have merchants and businesses and community members express support for the project rather than kind of disrespect it. And you can measure that in what you see in news articles that are done about the project or conversations that are held and so forth. So rather than having people say bad things, we wanted them to say good things about the project and then have people understand and be excited about the future benefits of our downtown. And actually, I have the greatest respect for Ed Roberge in the world because he has a tremendous amount of patience. You have to have like a skin as thick as a rhinoceros to be a city engineer in a place like Concord because you're just sort of a target for every skeptic, in the world, and Ed just sort of takes it all and is very calm and, sort of drives on through all the sort of challenges of the project. It went out to bid twice, and we couldn't get a contractor who wanted to...
Stepping on my...
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, all right. Well, we'll get it. But again, you really have to have a lot of sort of patience and confidence and just, I think, absolute belief in kind of where you're headed. And so our job is to help people kind of share the vision that Ed has in his head, kind of what's on those plans. The other strategy that we developed as part of this project, and I'm kind of proud of it because I sort of invented this myself, was called Help In, Complain Out. And so in any communication project, you have a series of audiences. You segment out your audiences, and then you develop kind of messages and communication programs and tactics to get those audiences to actually do the behaviors that you want them to do that I outlined in the slide before. So if we want people to park in garages and on side streets, we need to figure out a way to do that. If we want people to talk positively about the project, merchants and other people, we need to figure out a way to do that. And so if you look at sort of some of the key audiences for a project like this, you have sort of a series of concentric circles, and you can kind of think of it as throwing a pebble into a pond. You know how there's that little ripple in the center and then it kind of spreads out? Ever seen that? Well, that's how your sort of communication goes with a series of audiences. So in the center, in this case, is our downtown patrons, people who are spending money downtown. They're our real key driver here, because if they keep coming and supporting the businesses during construction, then the business people are going to be, happy, and they'll put up with the construction that's going on. Next circle out is the merchants, employees, and property owners, people who kind of are stakeholders right on Main Street downtown. Then the next circle out, the upstairs businesses. I think they're often overlooked, but in Concord you have law firms, lobbyists, all kinds of businesses in those upstairs offices, or some of the newer buildings. They're all organizations like that. And then on the outer circle are the city engineering department, the city administration, us, Louis Carno, Severino Construction, who are the contractor that was selected for the project. And so basically what we wanted to do was to drive home the point to our merchants, employees, and property owners. For example, if one of your patrons comes in and says to you, "Oh my gosh, this construction is really, really terrible out here. Everything's all torn up. It must be killing you, right?" Okay. What happens if the counter person at the work says, "Yeah, it's killing us, our business. It's horrible. Nobody can find a place to park, blah, 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 blah." What's going to happen?
Discourage people from being downtown.
Right. It's going to discourage people from being downtown, right? And what's the best advertising?
Mouth to mouth.
Good word of mouth, right? Best advertising, good word of mouth. If you have your business people basically bad-mouthing your construction project to the, people whose, kind of their care and feeding depends upon, what's going to happen? Everybody's going to stay away. It must be terrible if the people who are working downtown says it's terrible. So everybody who works in these upstairs businesses, they all live, kind of in the outskirts of Concord, the outskirts of downtown. They live in little communities like Dunbarton or Hopkinton or wherever. They're all going to go back to their home communities and say, "Stay away from downtown. It's terrible down there," right? Okay. So what we want is, for a behavior, if we want people to park on side streets and we want to maintain commerce, is we need to get our merchants, employees, and property owners, if people have kind of questions or concerns about what's going on, we want them to help them and say, "Oh, it's not so bad. There's free 2-hour parking on the other side of the street," which we implemented. Great, an initiative there that the city did to support the merchant community downtown. Or, "Hey, no problem. There's plenty of spaces in the garage," because there's all this skepticism. "Oh my gosh, you want us to park in the garages? There's never any room there." Well, that's not true. So anyway, the point is, one of the tactics that we use to kind of drive this help in, complain out. If you want to complain, merchants, complain to Ed or me. We have a complaint hotline. Don't complain to your customers. And so we actually developed a little handout that we handed out to the merchant community before construction started last spring that said basically, "Hey, look, your business really depends on you trying to put as positive, an outlook on this construction project as you possibly can, and, talking to people about where they can park and so forth. And it is really in your best interest to do that, rather than, complaining. And if there's any complaints you have, please make them to us." And that really took hold very well, because our merchant community kind of rose up, and for the most part, was very supportive and positive about the project going forward. And that made a huge difference in the fact that we actually gained businesses during construction last year, rather than what everyone thought. It's like, oh my God, you know, we're going to have all these businesses go out of business. Well, we didn't. We only had a couple move out, but they moved out for mainly other reasons. And we had, I think, 11 or 12 new businesses come in. Just quickly, we developed a series of tactics to support the project, from a website, social media. We have a webcam up on a building on Park Street and so forth, weekly e-newsletter that tells folks what's going to happen the next week in terms of the downtown construction. But the most important tactic that we implemented was face-to-face communication with both the merchant community and folks in the upstairs offices downtown. Our goal was to have a face-to-face meeting with every single business owner or manager, as not only on the sort of ground level stores, retail, the banks and so forth, but also the upstairs offices, which we did. Hugely time consuming. But the thing is, we live in an over-communicated society, so you can send people emails, you can have stuff in the paper, they might not read it, you know, they might not read the emails. You know how much stuff you get. You know, you kind of pick and choose what you see on your social media, you know, all that kind of thing. But if you get in somebody's face, they're generally going to pay attention to you. You know, you're going to have a conversation, and you're going to find out kind of what their fears and the objections are. It's kind of like a sales process. And so if their problem is, you know, parking, well, there's going to be free 2-hour parking on the other side, you know, the part that's not the work zone. And there's X number of spaces in the garages, and you know, you talk to people about that and they start believing it a little bit more. So our job in the communication aspect of this project was to kind of sell, at the time, the intangible. So this is a shot of what Main Street looked like before construction started in basically 2014, 2015. And then this is what Main Street was going to look like in the landscape architect SketchUp files that were presented to the City Council, series of concepts. Okay, looks pretty good, but still kind of like Lego world, you know, right? Okay. We commissioned, as part of, you know, our work, we needed to show people what the finished product was going to look like, because again, we're selling the intangible. So we commissioned this photo quality illustration of what North Main Street would look like. This was hugely helpful to us. It's not cheap to do, but we were able then to print this out before we even got started in those initial face-to-face meetings we had. We just printed it out on a sheet of paper, stuck it in a plastic sheet protector, and would go around and talk to people and say, hey, so this is what it's going to look like, and you're going to be getting, you know, the sidewalks are going to be about twice as wide as what they are now. We're going to have a single lane of traffic in each direction with a center, we call it a turning median, traversable median, explain to people how that's going to work so it keeps traffic flow going and so forth. And people look at this and go, huh, that looks pretty nice. Geez, you know, I can kind of see myself there now. This is really going to be, you know, going to be worth it. And again, we're conveying Ed's message, which was basically, if you build a place for cars, that's what you're going to get. If you build a place for people, that's what you're going to get. So this is a place for people, and it goes to, we're going to have a much more pedestrian-friendly, business-friendly, we're going to have a destination downtown rather than a drive-through downtown, which is what you saw in those, you know, kind of older pictures that Ed presented before. So I'm not going to go into really much more on this, but you know, our tactics included the brochure that you have. We got this out in little brochure holders all throughout downtown. It was actually mailed to every single residence in Concord in their water bill, you know, prior to construction starting and so forth. And again, I think what we've done is we've basically done a pretty good job about getting the community behind the project. We had an excellent contractor, which Ed's going to talk about probably in his remarks, and one of my goals, and I'm sort of checking off a little box here and being able to speak to you tonight, is that kind of as part of getting the whole community behind the project, I was hoping that we would have opportunities like this to share sort of what goes behind, something like this with groups like you, because it's a tremendous learning opportunity. We gave a tour to the students, high school students at Concord Regional Technical Education Center, like the one some of you went on earlier. And so every time we get an opportunity to be out with a group like this, you're going to be going back, because we still have more to do, on South Main Street this next construction season, but you're going to be talking to all the people that you talk to here at NHTI, and it's going to be like, hey, that's a pretty cool thing that's going on down there, rather than, oh my God, they're just, it's a hassle, don't go downtown, right? So I'll turn it over to Ed now.
Thank you, Brett. And he's really right about the aspects of his help in, complaint out. And I'm going to drive that in a little bit more as we get further toward our construction. So we're all excited. We just go through 9 months of a really intensive public process where we've developed consensus and everybody is charged up. We've got Brett and his communication team now really building a lot of excitement. Still a lot of apprehension out there too. People are generally scared, and we think we have a plan. And we come to bid. So we bid the project in August of 2013, and our $7.85 million project comes in at $12.2 million with one bidder. We said, oh boy, this is not good. We start to debrief, and we're like, well, we know the contractors are really busy in the summertime. This is probably an issue of summertime timing, where some bidders that were interested, that attended our pre-bid meetings, said, yeah, we would have bid, but we just didn't have the resources to be able to do it. So we clean what we think we clean our project up. We make some changes, material specification changes. We bid it in January. We get, excuse me, we get one bidder again. The same contracting team. This time it's $12.4 million. Must have been an expensive 5 months that the guy was considering. So we said, well, we're kind of in trouble right now. What's the issue with this project? And really, it came down to a lot of assumptions by contractors when you bid projects. I hate to say this, is there any contractors in here before I offend somebody? So, when we design a project like in design, bid, build, we're really designing it for the stupidest contractor that's out there, because we got to put so much into it. And a lot of that creativity from the contractor side is gone, because now we're just demanding what you need to do, and contractors protect themselves. So all that risk that's being built into the project is really, we see it in bid prices. So we kind of step back, and we have good experiences with our federal and our state partners, and we started looking at this CMGC, which is Construction Manager, General Contractor type of project delivery. So CMGC is relatively new in New Hampshire for highway projects. I think we were probably the first contract that was let out for specifically a highway project in New Hampshire. But it allowed us to sit down with a contractor. So we qualification-based selected a contracting team. We had 2 bidders that came to the table, and this was without prices. This was just, we are the contractor for this particular job. And ultimately, the contractor that was selected, a team called Severino Trucking, they're out of Candia, they really were well prepared for this submittal. And they showed us how that they would tackle this particular project. So we hired them, and this is bringing a contractor on. And typically, on CMGC projects, you really bring a contractor in at about a 30% design level. Well, keep in mind, we had 100% design drawing, so this is somewhat of a hybrid. But we were able to take our plans, sit down with the contractor at the table, and go line item by line item, looking at why is curb so expensive. And we're hearing answers like, well, the curb is so expensive because I can only do 100 feet a day. Well, what's telling you can only do 100 feet a day? So we really reshaped the project, and a project as complex as this, with so much subcontract management that occurs. I got a couple of photos that will show you how busy it gets at times. It really needed to be done this way. So we were able to sit down And we arrived at, through that selection process, and by the later part of 2014, we now have a contract amount. So that $12.4 million project, albeit we did shorten up the limits a little bit on the project, we were able to drive that price down to $9.65 million. So that's what our contract was. We held our final public hearing in July of 2014. It was adopted by City Council, and then construction started in September. And because we were starting so late in 2014, we really essentially spent the fall of 2014 doing utility work. Some water, sewer, and all of those elements. Before I get into the construction component, I hearken back to Brett's graphic of the help in, complaint out. Well, by being able to sit down with this contractor, we identified a lot of things, not only risk, but we also identified all the fears that the downtown community had with this project. And they shaped the team that's on the ground today based on being able to participate, hear, acknowledge, and then plan for all of these problems. And this is probably the greatest contractor that I've worked with on a really specific project. And we'll get into some examples. So as I said, Main Street utility work started 2014. 2015, we completed the North Main Street section. And in 2016, we're scheduled to do the South Main Street section. Well, this is what it looked like at the start. You know, this was an early start, with a little bit of snow on the ground. This was just at the end of March of earlier this year. And it's essentially, it looked like this at first. You know, we had generally small areas working. We still had our sidewalks open because we had to keep commerce going. It was really, really a good strategy. And then all of a sudden on a Monday morning in April, we drop a dig box on a 20-inch water main and we flood Main Street. And that's where Brett's team really comes into action, because it's the communication piece again. It was a simple mistake, but a bad mistake. Fortunately, we didn't flood any of these buildings out because we had this double-step barrier that we were trying to eliminate, and so that was the only time that we really liked the double-step barrier. So we worked through this with good preparedness and response. The contractor, engineering staff, we were all ready for something like, we didn't want it to happen, but we were ready for this, and we were able to turn this around pretty quickly. And wouldn't you know, a week later, we're working on an old hydrant valve from the 1800s, and it breaks off, and we've got a geyser going just about in the same spot. So we call this area right in here the Bermuda Triangle of Concord's downtown, because we learned really a lot from it, and it was just response, and we faced it. We went walking door to door, either folks from our team or folks from Brett's team.
People didn't think the second water shut-off was as humorous as the first one, I will.
So disaster struck 3 times, as I say. The first 2 bids was a total disaster. The third one was this water main, and it's been perfect ever since. Well, maybe not perfect, but nearly perfect. So this is how we did it. We started with the street. This is a reclaimer coming in here to grind up the pavement, and then we essentially paved the area so that we can get a laydown area for all the stuff that we're going to need to do. The next step is really looking at removing sidewalk. Now, as I said before, we had just paved the street, so that became now essentially our walking areas. So that, again, pedestrians needed to still get through. Even though we shut down half of the road for cars, we still needed people to get there. And as every time we pull a slab, we keep finding these little surprises. This happens to be right in front of the Barley House, and this is an old coal chute. There's probably 24 of them throughout all of downtown. Back in the day, the horse-drawn buggies of coal bins came along and opened up little doors and had coal being dumped into the basements. So we saw anything from these small little circular pipes to something like half the size of this room that were down below the sidewalks. So we had to really plan for that and work around that. We knew where some of them were. We ended up finding some surprises along the way too. So it's a little interesting piece of history. This is a good shot that I like in here, because this is Tim Schaff. He's the general superintendent for Severino, just pointing at another one. He's probably calling Greg, our guy, saying, yeah, we got another one over here. So as we pull sidewalk away and we start grading, we've got about 6 miles of underground conduit that's either irrigation, it's either all of our street lighting or our electrical circuits or our electrical connections for our parking meter kiosks. All of that is underneath those sidewalks, and then we systematically begin repaving the sidewalk. Again, as you can see, this doorway is open right here, and we would split that work area in half. Half of it would be being paved or concreted, and the other half would be open. And see this little, here's another touch by that contractor, it was carpets. Something as simple as a foot carpet at each door that was on gravel. Everybody really loved the carpets. It's just a good little detail. So we start building pieces of sidewalk at a time, and this job, it really, the motto was whatever it takes. And I like this one because we call this big guy in a little guy in a big machine, or however we want to phrase it. It's just how we had to do the job, and this is what it looks like at some times. And some days we had as many as 60 subcontractors on site, all working. This is, as Tim from Severino would describe it, it's not really a plan, it's a choreographed type of project here. There's too many things going on. Once the sidewalk is in place, and now as the sidewalk is in place, you can kind of see that we have sandwich boards that are already appearing on areas that we weren't even done yet. And we were really receptive to that. It was, again, businesses wanted to get word out that they were open, that they had their specials. So it started to open up this way, and now we're building what we call our furniture zone. And that's where our tree plantings are, our street lights. We have bike racks. Here's our parking kiosks. This is installing signs, okay, and, light posts. And again, using it right away, this guy was our mascot of the group. Somebody kept coming down, and he liked the string balls. He'd steal the string ball that we'd use for layout all the time. He'd be running around with the string ball. Again, whatever it takes. Here's Brett actually on a day helping install a bench. So it was really hands-on.
You could tell when we were getting close to deadline on phases because Tim Schaff, the project superintendent, rather than supervising, would be out actually like sleeves rolled up working, and I felt bad for him before market days.
Here's an example here of a delivery that's being taken, and one of the members of the crew saying, all right, let's load this up, let's get this to you, and I'll help you unload it. Wellington's, the wine and cheese shop downtown, they were just down station from here. We were pouring concrete and doing utility work right in front of the building one day when a wine delivery came. And basically the contractor stopped what he was doing. We created a chain of men from the truck right to the door, and we took the delivery of their wine cases, probably 30 wine cases on a particular day, because we just had to do really whatever it took. And that's what led to this. This is one of 3 downtown parties that merchants actually hosted. When I say a party, this was a lunch in May where they just said, you know what, contractor, we want to feed you because we appreciate all the work that you've done, all the effort that you've made. You've helped us stay in line here. And this is a picture of Councilor Hirschlag having a good time with SpongeBob and Digger. Again, it's all of a celebration. More construction, and this is the Phoenix Hall building. I talked about ADA accessibility. These entrances right here, before we started with this larger platform, again, widened areas. This is a new place that we created. We installed snow belt system on top, so if you go there today in a snowstorm, you'll see that that's a very effective area right where Bagel Works is.
What is that?
This is a snow melt system. So what you're seeing right here is what's in yellow is essentially, it looks like a Lego. It's a polystyrene insulation board, so it's insulating the heat from going down. It's keeping it up. And what you see in what you see in black is tubing. So this is all heat traced, goes back into the building, and it's a recirculating hot water system. So there's 4 of them downtown in different areas. And This is just one of those innovations that we had hoped to do more snow melt downtown. It just didn't work out well with Concord Steam at the time, but we were attempting to do that. Yes?
Hey, why don't you talk about the breadth of the project, talk about the signage on that building?
So part of it, I'm sorry, I keep hitting the wrong thing. As Tom mentioned here, this signage right up here. We're working in a historic downtown quarter, so we have a district that's historic, and then we have several individual buildings that are historic. So part of the historic review and the design development was, if we were going to modify and do work along here, what mitigation, what were we going to do to try to minimize that impact? Well, part of that was, if we were going to fill this area right in here along the building with basically fill it, and you'll see it in a second when it's done, to eliminate those steps so it's barrier-free, we're looking at granite material so that if you're standing looking at the building, the original look of the granite base was there. We also looked at this sign, and the sign dates back to the 1800s. There was several versions of this sign, and it's in a state of disrepair. So we told the historians, NHDHR, New Hampshire Division of Historic Resources, that we went through a permitting process, was let's replace this sign. So part of our program is to replace the sign. We also have, what isn't out yet, is a whole wayfinding signage program. Excuse me. And that's going to be introduced later part of this spring. And part of that signage will have your typical maps that you would see that say you are here. And it tells you all the other directions or other facilities that you might be going to. But on the back side, there's going to be historic messaging. So there's 6 of those types of kiosk signs that'll be downtown. One of them will be right in front of this building. It'll be specifically talking about downtown historic Concord architecture. So later on this summer, you architectural folks, you're going to really like to see that. So you can kind of take a tour and look at those 6 signs when they're up. So stay tuned for that. It's a good point, though. So here's Main Street before and now. You saw this picture before, and this is a typical, here was our 4-lane road. All you see is street and parking. Well, this is not Brett's visualization. This is the actual thing right here. So now you're really starting to see what downtown really means. We went from something that was maybe a 10-foot, 12-foot sidewalk to better than 20 feet of area now. We looked at balancing parking. We looked at taking this 3rd lane or this 4th lane and having a traversable median. Now, a little bit of innovation. When you look at the lanes, just from our perspective, these were 2 10.5-foot lanes, very narrow, very substandard. So it was 21 feet from, say, center line to the parking bay. Well, what we did was, we knew that we needed to have that kind of space to function, but we didn't need to function with it all the time. So the dimension from this outside edge to this parking is also 21 feet. So if you have a vehicle or if you have a fire truck coming by, we still need that 21 feet. We have it. It's just wrapped up in somewhat of a different package. And that's a fully traversable median. It's not raised, it's cobblestone, so it keeps people from driving on them. We don't want people to drive on it, but if you're bypassing folks temporarily, it's perfect for that. So that's where we came up with what we call the Super 2 on that road. Here's Main Street before and now as well. A landmark is the Puppy Love, the hot dog stand. Love that hot dog stand, by the way. That's it. It's looking here too. So now you can see we were really kind of stacked along here. A lot of cars were right on top of people, right on top of the buildings. We've now separated that. This went from about a 12-foot sidewalk to about a 22-foot sidewalk in this area. This is that bump out, okay? That's the bump out now. We've created a new place in that new central core of downtown, and that's heated in the wintertime as well. Here's another one. Double step curb right here. This is in front of the New Hampshire Savings Bank and the Merrimack County Savings Bank. This double step curb was a really significant barrier for folks that really had mobility troubles. And you were asking them to park their car, get out, walk up 2 steps, pay their ticket, go back, put the ticket on the dashboard, and come back up. So they're doing that 3 times. Well, we've completely eliminated that. And when you guys, some of you guys that came to the site, we talked about that grade change, that barn door effect that we had to change the grade, and it balances very well. And now you can see what was, maybe 1 or 2 planters. We now have a mix of trees and planters with flowers and boulevard lighting. It really has changed kind of the game of downtown. Something we're very proud of, and I mentioned it before, is ADA accessibility. We don't see a lot of projects where we go out and we try to solve ADA accessible building entrance issues with our transportation project. But in this case, this is what we call the Remy block. This is down toward the north end of the project near Center Street. We were able to get enough sidewalk width to build somewhat of a kind of a 2-level sidewalk area. And it allows these 4 businesses that were not accessible previously to be fully accessible now via ramp, and we have a lower bypass area. Both of those are wide enough to maintain. This was a huge added element, and our federal partners with the Tiger Grant Project qualified this as an eligible expense. This is Bagel Works, okay? So before this door entrance of the 3 businesses that are there, that was barrier as well. There was 2 steps, and some of those were really like nearly 9-inch steps. They were really, really high. Well, we eliminated that by building this platform out here. Again, the ability of the downtown streetscape project allowed us to be able to do that. Here's some other things too. Just these are great to look at. Again, our furniture zone with plants, trees, boulevard lighting. The lighting is a big change downtown. LED full cutoff lighting, and it's bright, and we don't have these uniformity issues where you get dark spots and really bright spots. It's leveled itself out really well. These really nice bump outs. These are really inviting. They're nice landscape architecture. Again, CRJA was our team leader. Even something as simple as wreaths on our new downtown lighting looks great. We really spent a lot of time in the design element. We heard a lot of this throughout the public process about how do we take a historic downtown and make it really nice, but recognize that. These are just some good black and white photos where this looks like this could be, from the 1800s in the city of Boston. Or these new design elements where this wasn't here before, but now it's a whole new sitting, living platform. And even this right in front of the State House, brand new. It looks like it's been there since the 1700s, as was all of the other elements. So this is what we call Main Street today. It's no longer a 4-lane highway that's auto-centric and trying to cram as many parking spaces as possible. Parking is important, but we found that what's more important is people walking, people living, and our downtown thriving. And that's what this really is essentially all about. So was it worth it? We say absolutely it was worth it. We're excited to finish the first phase in 2015. We're ready to start the second phase in 2016 and have all of Main Street complete. And certainly, we do this really for you younger you guys are the younger generation. And we want you guys to stay in the city and use these facilities. So this just happens to be the shot that we took when we gathered for our groundbreaking. A really excited group, and this was the Main Street, the North Main Street opening. Another good group of people that were there. So with that concludes what I'm here with, and if you have any other questions, certainly feel free to fire away. Yes?
How did it affect traffic after remodeling the whole traffic system? Was it like longer traffic? Like, how did it affect?
That's a great project. Great question. So with this project, we really did a lot of examination before we started. We looked at what traffic volumes were, what were the delays. So there's a lot of data that we collected just so that we could prove later on what those impacts are. So queuing or delays or time traveled. We've looked at that. Now that we've reopened the 2-lane roadway, we're not seeing any appreciable change. So we've seen a lot better capacity at the traffic signals, and we're seeing traffic moving through. But we're not seeing any significant delays. So there's a lot of good improvements that have occurred. It's all positive. dropping from 4 lanes to essentially 2 lanes. It's been very positive. Yes?
So you said the first half is North Main Street and the second half is South Main Street. How south are you going?
We go to Concord Street with the full, what I call the streetscape improvement project, where you see us changing sidewalks. We're going to tie the 2-lane roadway further south all the way to Store Street with just pave and restripe those sections. But that's the streetscape project in bulk is right to Concord Street, which is where the Capitol Center for the Arts is.
Could you clarify what you just said? From Concord Street to Store Street, you're gonna make it go from 4 to 2 lanes?
Yeah, we're gonna maintain the geometry of what our project layout was, because our original project went all the way to Store Street in the south end. We want to make sure that we don't just immediately drop that 4-lane into the 2-lane section at, say, Concord Street. So that will continue on in that 2-lane fashion with a 3rd lane occasionally, like at Thorndike Street. So there's a bit of a change to
So
continue.
there'll be like there'll be a large single lane on each side? Is that basically what you're gonna end up
That's
doing?
correct, yeah. Yeah, you'll see instead of the island that you see here with cobblestones, it'll be just a painted double yellow line right there. So it'll be that same 15-foot travel lane with that 6-foot median is essentially what you'll see, and that'll head down toward the Stores Pearly Street intersection. The intersections stay the same, so we'll still have a 5-lane road condition down there. We need the lanes for capacity at that intersection, and then obviously at Center Street as well that we maintained.
And then while you're talking about Store Street, when will that be extended to 393?
Oh, it's a good question. Yeah, this is great. This is coming up. Yeah, I like that. We're thinking forward. Yeah, so we're actually working on that now. There's dollars in our capital program in 2017 for the full design of what we call that Store Street northerly extension. So it's in our fiscal 17 and fiscal 18 programs. So it's coming.
Do you still keep, as you move forward with the new project in 2016, do you still keep the same team for as far as construction or designers for
Yeah.
architecture-wise?
Absolutely, yeah. No, we have the same project team involved. The contractor is fabulous. Just his mindset, the way that they work, and it's something as simple as just simply being nice. That's really what he's got a code of ethics that he had all either his staff or any of the subcontractors that he hired. Just be nice. Understand that they're the ones being the inconveniencer, not the public being in their way. That was kind of a change of thought process with that. So we're happy to have that team together. Our guy, Brett's guys, we're all together, and we had a full year under our belt. We're confident as we move into the south end that we're going to be able to serve the same way. Hopefully we don't break a water main, and we'll knock on wood for that. But you know, we learned a lot from 2015, so we're ready for 2016.
Did you have to go through a full planning board approval for this, or did you get a pass on that?
We actually went to the planning board. Yeah, we did visit the planning board. The planning board endorsed our project. We went to the Heritage Commission. So we treat most of our major projects like this as if it were a private development project. We wanted to solicit as much input from all of the groups. So yeah, we were there.
AOT, did they make the requirements for drainage treatment and that sort of
For AOT? Yeah, no, this project was exempt from AOT. We called it a maintenance project. I think our DOT friends will enjoy that, how we pulled that one off. But no, it was, we do have minimal treatment. That is probably one of the areas that we talked about, maybe some green LID type of treatment. We just didn't have space. We were lacking space. Yes?
I remember going on the trip for our class to see, the construction, and I remember pointing out like the spot where the drainage was having an issue at that corner. I'm not sure if you remember, but
I do.
Has that changed? Have you guys already gotten into that or like looking through it? Or?
So So we invite them down, and the first thing they do is they criticize. He finds the only drainage spot, the only problem that we have, which incidentally was right at, this is Capitol Street right here. It's just off of your graphic, but Capitol Street is right here. It was right in that bump out. So it wasn't graded properly. He finds it and criticizes us immediately on the spot. No, it's been fixed. It was a good, in fact, you know, we pointed out, we had marked, every time we find a deficiency, we outline it in green chalk. As soon as you left, we outlined it in green chalk again to make sure that we didn't forget. So, but thank you for bringing that to my attention. I appreciate that.
Is there a way to measure a return on investment on a project like this?
Yeah, there's a, Federal Highway loves data collection, and we're committed to report back for the next 5 years on a number of elements. One of those elements is kind of tied into economic vitality, and it's business vacancies. So we had 18% vacancy rate before we started, and as Brett said, we lost 3 businesses last year that closed. Or
relocated.
Well, 2 of them relocated, that's correct, and one of them actually wanted to work out of a truck. The Dips yogurt shop wanted to be out of a truck as opposed to a stand in business front. But we gained 11 or 12. I think 12 opened. And a lot of those that are opening are really excited about the project. So this property values and building vacancies are 2 elements that we will be evaluating right up through 2022 when we complete this project. So we went through a whole benefit cost analysis effort to prove that this project was worthwhile, that it was worthy of the federal dollars, and I think we're going to find that it's really going to come to fruition.
Is it like a targeted date where if everything was perfect, you will get your full return by a certain date?
We think we're going to hit that. We're going to have positive results even in our first year from some of our traffic safety reports. We have traffic volumes. We have safety, so any crash data at either crosswalks, at intersections, or at some of the midline segments, and our bus activity. So our transit growth. We're hoping that we get transit growth. I'm going to think that within 3 years we're going to be beyond paying back this project.
Yeah, and I would just add anecdotally to that, because we, at the end of each phase of the project, went and talked to the merchants who were sort of most affected by that phase of the project. And what we heard in our kind of sweep through in the October timeframe was that we were asking businesses, what are your customers thinking about the new streetscape and so forth? And they're saying, oh, hey, we're seeing a lot more people downtown, a lot more people in the evening downtown, a lot more young people downtown than there were before. And you can obviously see, it's really interesting, the entrepreneurial spirit of the, sort of small business person downtown. As soon as the sidewalks are poured and done, they're out with more these black, the black metal tables and the black metal chairs, just like boom, after talking to the code enforcement people. But there's a lot more kind of sidewalk dining opportunities downtown, which is a huge benefit for those businesses, because they basically increase their seating capacity as a result of this. So, yeah.
Yes.
Now that the street's taken care of, do you see have you heard from any of the building owners about improvements that's going to spur on their end? Is that something that's kind of happening as we're going off that?
Yeah, and we've seen several opportunities already, even something as simple as replacing the awnings. Several businesses had window awnings or overhang awnings. They wanted to change them. Carrying Gifts was a good example of it. He was instrumental in participating in the planning component, and once he saw the Main Street coming alive, that was the first thing that he did, was reinvest. And Tom, I think you can.
Well, I work with Ed. If everybody looked at the picture on the right-hand side, the picture to the right, that large brick building on the right-hand side, that just had a closing for financing on Friday for $2 million. It's going to be 20 market rate apartments that will be in there with retail on the first floor, and that's been dead for decades in reality. There's been people in there, but it's been, operating a fire extinguisher system and whatnot. And if you go further back up this way, almost where the blue awning is, Brett had pointed out when merchants actually have been able to double their seating capacity out onto the street. The city then worked with the State Liquor Commission to get liquor licenses out there so they can start serving alcohol out there, and businesses have just taken off. And that's just within that 50 feet that you can see in that picture right there, and that goes up and down the street.
And the Eagle Hotel was sold from a real estate trust to Brady Sullivan, right?
Right, so Brady Sullivan, I think the largest commercial office operator in the entire state, bought Eagle Hotel building and where Citizens Bank is, and they're renovating those. Matter of fact, I just sent information to them today to do uplighting on their buildings. So they're actually hiring a lighting architect to do lighting on their buildings so people can see within that. So that's just all that's all between last Friday and today.
Wow.
So from really completing the second Friday of November, we've seen a lot of individual business investment, which is really what this project was intended to do. And it's hard to put a number. I wish we could put a clear number on that. But our assessor will. She's a shark. She doesn't miss anything. So our assessor will be assessing those buildings to increase value. We'll see that quick. Yes.
Just a few statements ago, you had said the completion date of 2022
That's for our data reporting.
for data reporting.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll be done construction at the end of this year. Yes.
How does the public feel after seeing the first phase done, and how they are going to feel for the next phase? Do you think they're more positive about what's going to happen next?
Well, there's a downtown group called the Merchants Roundtable. We had a meeting with them this morning, as a matter of fact, Brett and I. And it's dramatically changed in terms of they understand what's going to happen. So the South End businesses are already prepared. And it really comes down to communication. As much as I'm an engineer, when you look at projects like this, you cross a lot of barriers. I would always encourage you guys to think about a municipal engineering career, just because you're going to see a lot of different things. That's one of them, is to talk to the people. There's a very positive outlook right now of what's coming, and it's a very complex and difficult project. But because of that communication piece and being upfront with people and honest with them, and more so being available, so that if they pick up the phone and they have a problem, or if they say, I've got a big delivery that's coming on Thursday, and we're willing to change our work around, that's what it's really all about. So it's been very positive, and I think we're going to continue that. There's less apprehension moving into this phase of the project, just because people see how it was done last year, and everybody survived. And they are already asking for their carpets, by the way. Everybody wants their little carpet piece. I'll go to the back and then in front. Yes. Did you raise your hand, or you okay? Go ahead. Yeah, that's it.
Are you guys looking towards State Street whatsoever, north and south?
Well, I think what we're finding is the depth, and the city manager would tell you his goal is to look at Main Street, as important that it is. There's more depth to it. So from Store Street to State Street, we've just introduced a host of projects that are in our out year, but to start to look at shaping the depth and breadth of Main Street. It's great. It's a great comment.
Quick
Yes.
question about have you planned with the building that the city owns, the old employment security, to do a street project, road project, with that being undecided what's going to happen? How do you allow for that?
Yeah, that's a tough thing, because we're at a point where we don't want to do something and I don't want to say waste money, but spend money in an area that might change dramatically. But we want to make sure that we move forward. We're not sure of the timing of the employment security building project, or even that block for that fact. So we're going to continue on moving forward, and if something can happen and align together, then it may happen. But yeah, we'll just be careful in the future to if a major project does come along, let's respect what we've already done to the best extent possible, and maybe even improve what we've done. So that's always an interesting thing. We were able to take advantage of the bindery building when that came along We said, look, don't invest in your final streetscapes, let's just bituminous pave it. So that's what it's looked like for the last year and a half. We're going to be working in that area this year, so that streetscape will be complete. So
Does it make it more likely that, the building project would actually, happen sooner with the road project?
based on what we've heard, Relish is a good, that Relish hamburger shop, if you've been there, I haven't been there yet, but everybody's raving about it. But that was somebody that came in because of the Main Street project, and we think there's a lot of positive energy that's being gained right now. So I hope that it does bring in. We looked at, when we were talking about this project in 2011-12, we've got, all of this different scattered development opportunity, but what brought it all together? Well, I argue that it's the transportation link that brought that together, the Main Street project, and now we're seeing that. Even as quickly as just completing the first phase, we're seeing that linkage, we're seeing that synergy, we're seeing individual investment, we're seeing a big Brady Sullivan buying 2 buildings downtown because they want to be there and they want to continue to invest in downtown Concord. That's a great boon for the city.
I have one last question.
One last question, and then we're going to call it, okay?
Did you find another drainage problem somewhere?
No.
All right.
I had a question about the bidding process.
Yeah.
When you finally did the biddings and everything was said and done, was the bidding part of both phases, the first one and the second one, was that all in one bid?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yep, that was all done, so the project is the contract award is for the entire work that they're about to complete this year.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Some of you may have that. We'll have a program in 2 weeks dealing with the songs of Nepal. Very different than what we had tonight. But thanks very much for being here, and welcome back here anytime.
Thank you.
So you're really going to commute, you're going to move Store Street up to Commercial?